Hello students, how are you doing? Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Ramesh Chand Devrat from Indian Institute of Tourism and Travel Management, Gwalior. Today we are going to study the module Heritage Interpretation under the paper 2 Guiding Essentials. We bring this course to you as a part of e-Pathshala initiative by the Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India, to make postgraduate education accessible to all. Discussions during the previous modules has led to a solid foundation in terms of nature interpretation. In this module, we take up another important discussion on heritage interpretation. We will straight away begin with the understanding the concept of heritage interpretation. In this module, we will also discuss about where there is a need of heritage interpretation, an important discussion how guide can communicate the value of Indian heritage monuments in a better way will be the last part of our discussion in this module. Heritage interpretation by the tour guide help visitors to appreciate historical environments like monuments, historical buildings, historic houses, ruins, castles, temples, commonly statues, war memorials, monumental sculptures, archaeological sites, once familiar public figures, etc. This is an aura of mystery around every tourist site. Made up stories about a historic site will not be useful to engage with visitors. It is only when true stories about a place is provided, the visitor will be able to engage with the place and they will be able to understand the heritage landscape as a whole. Real understanding and appreciation of the heritage site is possible only when the interpretation is true and authentic. Fair and clear interpretation will help the visitor have a stimulating and enjoyable experience at the heritage site. The audience assumes certain things about places, they develop their own notions of the past and they have their own sense of the place when they come to a place. The heritage interpretation provided by the qualified tour guides will help the audience understand the actual meaning and significance of a heritage site. Every heritage site is related to some kind of illusion, untold stories, and unmade connections. Definitions of greatness are very common in heritage interpretations. Now forgotten achievements of the once familiar men and women are also a part of heritage interpretation. Heritage interpretation helps visitors understand what it was and what it was meant to be. While exploring the different contexts of interpretation, the tour guide will be able to actually bring the past to life in the minds of the users. Significance of heritage building is known only when one knows what it was in the past. This is important to help visitors fully respect the history of the heritage site. Visitors who feel engaged in the stories and interpretation by the tour guide enjoy the places better. Heritage interpretation can be defined as a structured approach to non-formal learning specialized in communicating significant ideas about a place to people on leisure. It establishes a link between visitors and what they can discover at heritage sites such as nature reserve, a historical site or a museum. Heritage interpretation is about educating people about the importance of a particular heritage. Not all historical buildings, statues and monuments are considered heritage. Heritage is actually related to everything that people really want to save. Anything that should be saved as heritage has clear information about its significance. There is a clear definition of what to look for in it. Official heritage is national and unofficial heritage belong to families and clans. There are local, regional and international heritages. Heritage benefits someone's and disadvantages someone. Heritage interpretation involves discovering the past and explaining the past of the heritage site. It is also about explaining what we do with them now. The practice of heritage interpretation reflects a group's search for identity. Interpretation reveals the stonework, artifacts, and the people of the heritage more clearly. The tour guide should present true history. It is very important to avoid false history. There are likely to be different truths to different places. Holding on to one type of truth will be offensive to someone who is holding the other side of the truth. This does not mean that anything and everything is true. Heritage interpretation should be done after deeply researching into authentic sources from histories, things, natures, and culture to create something new and true for today's interpretation for the heritage site. Heritage interpretation concentrates on telling how and why the place is significant. There will be effect of the story for the architecture, art, politics, economics and social history of a heritage. The tour guide should help the visitor understand why someone is conserved, interpreted and managed. Heritage interpretation should progress beyond theorizing whose heritage is conserved, for whom it is conserved and at whose expense it is conserved, and all questions that heritage interpretation should answer. Let's have a look why heritage interpretation is necessary. In reality, the story of the heritage site is the actual soul material that keeps the spirit and attractiveness of the place alive. Heritage interpretation helps the visitor to identify the real strength, story and significance of the heritage site. Heritage interpretation improves the experience of the tourist and it benefits the host communities as well. Heritage interpretation helps visitors to appreciate and experience the site in the right way. Heritage remnants from prehistory through history up until recent times will be able to survive only when the significance of the heritage is properly revealed to the visitor in the heritage interpretation process. The story of the heritage site that talks about the cultural, economic and social significance of a heritage site is the only thing that motivates visitors to visualize and experience the site in the right way. Visitor tends to see and experience the heritage site in a certain way only based on the interpretation provided by the tour guide. Therefore, it is very important for the heritage interpretation to be authentic, well researched and true. If visitors were allowed to think on their own, they are going to wrongly interpret the sculptures, civilization and cultures of their past as per their personal fancy. This is not right. Visitors need help in the form of heritage interpretation to see the heritage sites in the way it is meant to be. From archaeological sites through battlefields and other heritage sites like monuments, palaces and sculptures, heritage interpretation is very important to pass on the right message about the right place to the right people to trigger the right experience for the tourist. Imagine heritage interpretation as a bridge. Visitors crossing the bridge will discover hidden secrets of original objects, which can lead to a greater satisfaction and enjoyment. This in turn will render visitors more likely to return to a place, or at least encourage them to tell their friends and family about it. Heritage interpretation should improve the understanding and perception of the past in the minds of the visitors. The interpretation should construct the historic environment in the minds of the visitors. There are different techniques applicable for heritage interpretation. Each heritage sites require a different nature of understanding about the sites, monuments, and places for the visitor to get an authentic experience of the significance of the place. This means a different interpretation technique should be used for each time. There is nothing called a one fit for all interpretation for every kind of heritage site. Tour guides should handle heritage interpretation in a right way to eventually communicate the value of Indian heritage and monuments to the visitor. Most of the heritage interpretations are based on the evidence of past human activity. Extraordinary claims about heritage sites require extraordinary evidences. Heritage interpretations are based on strong and authentic evidence from archaeological studies of past cultures identified by studying the material remains of the past. Any remains of that which was created, used, and modified by people is used as the evidence that tells and validates the story or concept associated with a heritage site. The material and physical remains from the past is used to understand, reconstruct, and recreate all aspects and concepts that ruled the past. This includes validating and verifying the activities of daily living of ordinary people who lived in the past. It is also about validating grand conquests and other events executed by kings and emperors. While several evidences forming materials and excavated and the concepts and happenings of the history are interpreted by the correlating facts, not all heritage sites and their stories are lost and buried in the mud. Several heritage sites have well preserved, authentic, and excellent documentation that tell about what the place is, what it was, and what it was meant to be. Some heritage interpretations are reconstructions of concepts and answers derived by assembling jigsaw puzzles of the archaeological remnants of the past. Some heritage interpretations are from clearly documented historical evidences associated with the heritage site. Heritage interpretations are also based on the concept derived from the behavior and beliefs of group of the people who are lived in and around the heritage site. Buildings, written records, and other kinds of physical remains stand as validating proofs to past culture and happenings. However, the concepts, behavior, and beliefs cannot be easily derived. They need to be correlated and factually verified for the truth of the matter and the related interpretations. There are more than 35 plus World Heritage Sites recognized by the UNESCO in India. These heritage sites are considered to be culturally heritage, natural heritage, or mixed heritage. Agra Fort, Ajanta Caves, Nalanda University, Capitol Building Complex in Chandigarh, Kanchenjunga National Park, Kaziranga National Park, Manas Wildlife Sanctuary in Assam, Mahabodhi Temple Complex at Bodh Gaya in Bihar, Humayun's Tomb in Delhi, Qutub Minar and its monuments in Delhi, Red Fort Complex, churches and convents of Goa, Champaner Pavagadh Archaeological Park in Gujarat, group of monuments at Hampi, group of monuments at Padakal, Buddhist monuments at Sanchi in Madhya Pradesh, rock shelters of Bhimbetka in Madhya Pradesh are just a few to name from the many heritage sites. There are a lot more names to be added. These are just a few sample heritage sites in India. When you examine each heritage site to study the history of the site, there is a rich history associated with each site. Interestingly, they are factually verifiable as well. In the heritage interpretation process, the tour guide will explain to the visitor about the location, architectural significance, cultural significance, economic significance and social significance of a specific heritage site. If there are glorious and glamorous influential stories associated with the heritage site, it needs to be demonstrated as well. Heritage interpretation is a repetitive process and it is important to reconstruct the history of the place in the minds of the different types of tourists by explaining truthful facts to them in a way they can understand. Appropriate heritage interpretation and story reconstruction should be done for each and every tourist. This is important to help them understand and experience the site in the way it is actually meant to be. A few approaches to heritage interpretation can be summarized as follows as applicable for interpreting the historical architectural environment. Art is used as a medium for interpretation. Understanding and appreciating art is a type of heritage interpretation process. The history of the sculpture can give a clue to the people, culture and the stories of the period it actually relates to. Visual and historical analysis of art and artifacts by students and scholars hard at work has helped uncover several realities from the past. These realities from central themes in heritage interpretations to eventually help visitors or tourists engage in the heritage site. Presenting and interpreting past and recent troubles associated with the heritage site is a way to go. History, war and heritage go hand in hand with each other. There were brutal and bloodiest wars that stand as evidence to major events in a heritage site. Battlefield, archaeology and forensic archaeology will be able to explain feelings of greed, ambition, cultural destruction, cultural reconstruction and other consequences of conquests to make for valid stories in heritage interpretation. Live interpretation for reconstructing the past is a method of interpretation used by tour guides to express the behavior of people and personalities of the past to visitors. The tour guide can choose to reenact events with famous dialogues when explaining sculptures and literatures associated with a specific heritage site. Making use of technology to interpret historic landscape is an approach. Creating PowerPoint slides using audio visuals or using movies and documentaries based on heritage sites is a way to explain the site to visitors in a lively manner. Explaining odd arrangements that are buried in dirt in a way of heritage interpretation. Arrangements in dirt and cold proofs from the past which automatically creates an aura of mystery and a feeling of dealing with the treasure. When this feeling is coupled with the narration of the stories related to the excavation to the visitors, then the interpretation feels more live and natural. Visitors do not forget these experiences for a lifetime. Explaining new evidences that support already existing legends and myths is a method of validating and reassuring history and heritage associated with the place. However, in some cases, some findings can work much against already existing stories. Whether it is the for or against evidence, evidence is evidence and it helps create a new theme for interpretation. There are natural causes to explain certain events like how was it found, how to justify the big time difference, and so on. Stratigraphy is a technique that is used to understand the formation of the different types of materials. It also helps to understand how the diverse materials in the earth got disturbed and so on. It helps one understand the working history of sedimentary rocks and several geological effects like metaformism, sea level changes, tectonism, climate change, organic evolution, and more. The data and concepts from different specialties are studied and verified with validating evidences and facts to provide with the comprehensive study of an archaeological finding. Such findings become strong stories for heritage interpretation in a scientific way. Excavations in many cases might be complete or they might be in the process of excavation. The artifacts and structure would require an understanding in the stratigraphic context to be used in telling the story of the site. This is because stratigraphy helps determine chronological relationship of different episodes or layers of excavations from different time periods found in the same archaeological or heritage site. Students, after excavation, the archaeological site may disappear under modern usage, undergo restoration where the rebuilding of bits has taken place using whereby possible the original materials undergo some conservation, which is about preserving the remains as they were found. Undergo reconstruction is an attempt to recreating the original. Tour guiding on an archaeological site may destroy archaeology unless it is sensitively done with responsibility. Tour guide is a role model for the group. Do not touch or remove anything in the archaeological site. Tour guide must use descriptive interpretations of what can often not be seen. Tour guide may find it useful to use information, panels, models and drawings for the interpretations. Students, let's see the duties of the tour guide in the heritage interpretation process. He needs to manage group expectations before arrival of the heritage site. Explain what can and what cannot be done. Control the group, no litter, no smoking, no food, no climbing, no remains. Understand rules of the site. Work with the site guides and wardens. Understand legislation regarding antiques. Successful heritage interpretation results in better appreciation of heritage by both local residents and visitor. It is critical to building the virtuous circle of good conservations of the historic environment, understanding, valuing, caring for the enjoying heritage. Heritage interpretation has played a crucial role in regenerating declining urban, industrial and rural areas through tourism and conservation programs. Places change over time. The meaning of places also change over time. As Lowenthal in 2015 argues, there are three levels of historical analysis: memories, historical records and artifacts, which in turn corresponded to three academic disciplines of psychology, history and archaeology. For example, when the war generation first visited battlefield sites after the last war, it was to pay homage, to remember. As that generation ceases to be with us, so do the motivation to visit change. Places become less to do with remembrance and more to do with the day trip excursions. Places become less of a memorial and more of a tourist attraction. Places move from being a memory to being an historical record and artifact. This may not be the case, of course, for the inhabitants of those communities close by those sites, for whom the heritage may mean something different altogether. Students, till now you must have understood what is heritage interpretation and how important it is. The last words are: tour guiding on an archaeological site will motivate the visitor to know as much as possible about the past human activity in the heritage site. This is regardless of whether the tour guiding of the archaeological site is for sites from prehistory through history or in recent times excavations. When the heritage interpretation is based on truth and valid evidence, then the visitor will develop a natural attraction towards the site. Some visitors might even extend their trip, make repeat visits to know more about the site. They might even choose to refer their friends. Stratigraphy is very important when it comes to heritage interpretation. Stratigraphy helps to understand and evaluate the order of tradition that were followed in different areas and periods of time. Heritage interpretation should avoid confusing methods and concepts when providing controversial explanations. Tour guides should be careful about the way they present the facts. It is natural for anyone to be biased towards approaches that they are familiar and comfortable with by virtue of education and experience. Controversial opinions from visitors will happen during the heritage interpretation. With practice and experience, the tour guide will master the art of dealing with objections by using explanations in a diplomatic manner. Ultimately, heritage interpretation adds value to the experience of the visitors. In the next session, we will talk about cultural interpretation. Thank you. Happy learning.